How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. So today in the pod, we're going to be talking with Ari Klau. As you remember, we had him on, if you've been listening, just a number of months ago. And on today's round two interview with him, we have a lot of super deep philosophical, religious conversation. And I just want to say I share some things about my story that I'll just say, like, I'm a little bit nervous to post it, if I'm being completely honest. However, I think that it's good to share and be vulnerable, and these are things that I've thought a lot about. But I will make this one caveat as I am releasing this episode. If I say anything that seems wrong, there is a chance that I am wrong, and I am happy to be wrong. There's sensitive topics that I talk about, especially when it comes to homosexuality, my experiences with that whole realm, just like things with trans identity, things with religious belief systems. Um, all of that to say, I don't think that I know everything. I don't think that I'm right about everything. I do have beliefs and I hold them very close, but I am pretty open minded. And if you think that there's something that you disagree with, feel free to air that out there. But I just want everyone to know that I'm not sharing this from a place of I want to prove somebody wrong. These are the things that I grew up with and things that I have since an age of reason decided that I wanted to dive into and find out for myself and the things I believe and why I believe them. So I won't ramble too much, but I just wanted to say um, I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be, but this is just a very real conversation with a very real friend. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Ari Klau again. Please enjoy it. Really quick before we get back to the show, just wanted to say that we have episode 100 coming up. I can't even believe that. And we are going to do things a little bit different for that episode. I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to interview me and ask me some questions. So if you have some questions you would be interested in asking, you can check the show notes link in the description. It will take you to a Google form where you can add any and all and as many questions as you would like to. I will compile a list and hopefully go through as many of those questions as I can for that episode. So if you're interested in that, check out the link. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy today's show. Dude, so how you doing, man? It's been, I don't know how long it's been. I'm trying to think. I should have looked beforehand, but
Would have been
it's
July,
several months.
right?
Yeah.
July. It's now October. Because I was home staying at my parents leading up to 70.3 Maine, which was in July. So I've been good since then. Yeah, I did the race, and then got back to Seattle, moved into my new house, which is where I'm currently at. And that was a process. Got this new bike, which was behind me, and like setting that up was, just matching the fit for my old bike was also a process. So
Yeah, it
there were,
takes some time.
a couple of weeks in there where I was just not training as well as I wanted to, just because of like everything was just taking time. Felt like I had something to do every day. And then I went to France and trained my absolute ass off. It was amazing. It was awesome. It was like a dream location sort of training camp. And I was with Penny Slater, who following the camp got 7th at the Ironman World Champs in Nice. And just she takes care of business. So it was great to be around her and like just get stuff done, just get work done.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the lessons you feel like you learned from just that time spending with her?
Well, it would be the second time, like the same lessons the second time. It's not just as easy as watching her go about her day and doing it. I'm working on it, and I feel like I have certain challenges that prevent me from doing it. But she'll just get up. Like I had to get up, at least 15 to 20 minutes earlier than she did for, she'd say, okay, we're leaving at 7. And she would get up at 6:15 or 6:20. I had to get up at 6, sometimes earlier than 6 to be ready at the same time. A lot of that has to do with, dude, I have to take 2 poops before I do my first session of the day. I have to,
same way. That's so funny.
Or it's going to come out and it's going to it will literally it won't ruin the session, but it's going to interrupt the session. And I can't just, you can't force them out.
It's a nature thing.
Yeah, it feels very out of my control. And maybe, if somebody's listening to this who has figured out a solution, send me a DM.
For real.
But so I also just, I'm not as good. Like she would have everything ready the night before. And so I tried to just be better about getting everything ready the night before. So you can kind of just get up, eat a little bit, have a coffee, and then
Mm.
get out the door once you got your poops out of the way. But I would say
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing, is how little time she needs to get ready. Like, we got back from one session
Mm.
one time, I'm pretty sure it was 12:20. It was like a big swim run, because in Nice,
Yeah.
well, we weren't in Nice, we were in this tiny town nestled up in the mountains, and it was like a 35 to 40 minute drive to the pool and to where we did our run sessions, because we could do easy runs from the house, but you couldn't really do a session. It was like super hilly, and the roads were kind of sketch sometimes,
Oh yeah.
just with traffic. So we had to go down to basically the run course, for the Nice World Champs. So it
Hmm.
was a lot of driving, and like we would try to double up the session, so it would be like big swim, big run, so that like maybe we wouldn't have to go down the next day or something like that, because it's not
Yeah.
just a casual drive. But we got back from a big swim and run at like 12:20, and we
Hmm.
had a big ride. It was probably like a 4 hour ride, might have been
Oh.
5 hours. Um, and she was like, "You think you'll be ready to go at 1?" And I was like, "No, like that's impossible. Like, I have to, like, even if I don't shower, I still have to like eat and get ready for this ride, which like I feel like I cannot do that in 40 minutes." And so
Yeah.
I think she just ended up, uh I don't know if she waited or she just went without me, and I like
Yeah.
met her somewhere, I don't know. But I just remember being like, that is 40 minutes from now. No, I can't do it. And she's just like, okay. It's like no problem for her. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a quality of, you know, all those women in the top 10 and all the kind of guys who are placing that high, who are sort of that level in Ironman, but
Hmm.
it's impressive. That's by
Yeah.
by. It's not one thing. It's all encompassing. It's the lifestyle. It's routine and habits and time management,
Mm.
that just allow her to get in a super large amount of training and recover.
Mm.
But there's not much else. Like, we didn't do anything else. There was no going out to eat. There was like maybe we'd have time to watch an episode of Netflix at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it was just training and eating. It was insanely hard to get out. I got out like one YouTube video, because I would just like edit it in 15 to
So
20
many.
minute chunks here and there between meals and training sessions. It's, I mean, it's what it means to be a professional athlete. Like, it is your
Yeah.
job, and there's not all that much time for hobbies outside of it, at least in a
Yeah,
block
for
like
sure.
that leading into the biggest race of the year.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So do you feel like overall it gave to you or took away from you this experience? And you can take that however you like.
Oh, gave 100%. There were so many moments where we would just be like running during sunrise, because we were starting early, especially when it was really
Hmm.
hot, and we were running down on the waterfront. Uh, and the coast is beautiful, but it's also very, very urban over there. And the bike path is like nestled in between this like 2 lane high, not a highway basically, but 2 lane, lots of traffic. Like, people
Yeah.
are moving pretty fast. And it's just this like hustle and bustle, but like through it all, I was just like, just kind of breathe. And, we're grinding along doing Penny's sort of
Yeah.
big marathon sessions. I was like, I'm going to remember this time for the rest of my life. Like, when we were just,
Mm.
mid to late 20s, just racking up credit card debt just to go chase the dream, and like
Yeah.
getting up at the crack of dawn to run, 20 miles, whatever interval session, and then go swim and then go ride for 5 hours, just like relentlessly chasing it. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just experiences like that I've been blessed to have this year, with Australia and with France, and going to New Zealand for World Champs later in the year, that
Hmm.
are just things you can't. They're maybe not smart financially, and maybe even in the grand scheme of training. I could have
Hmm.
done something better, something more specific for me, because it was an Ironman block, and I wasn't even doing much intensity in my own zones. I was really going there. Penny helped me out with, like, she basically got the Airbnb, and I just had to get myself there.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like a life experience that like this is the time to do it. And I was telling my dad, like, oh man, that was an interesting financial decision. He's like, just this is the time you have to do that. Like, you can't do things like that later in life. And so you did it, and like, you're not going to regret having done it. So even in the moment, I was like, this is amazing right now, and I'm always going to remember how cool this was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how we have those opportunities now, and it does feel stressful. I think that's what really holds people back from realizing their greatest potential in a lot of ways, because when you are young, you have less responsibility and lots of ambition, but for whatever reason, through nature and nurture, some people just really shun that because it, like you said, it's uncomfortable. But I remember, so Nicholas Chase has been my coach for the past 9 months, and um, last January they had a training camp down in I forget even where it was. I think it was Cozumel or somewhere down in Mexico, and I almost did it. And after the fact, it actually would have worked out financially because I ended up making enough money from some random gig that could have paid for it, and I didn't go. And then he said something to the effect of, he's like, it always works out if you take the word risk, and like. Obviously, it doesn't always work out, but I think 9 times out of 10, when you want something and you're willing to make the sacrifices for it, if you're doing it for, like, I would say solid motivations that are intrinsic to you and others and adding value, that it usually does work out.
Well, we
I've
talked
been
about
amazed
this.
at time and time again.
We talked about this. I don't know if you had read The Alchemist between our last podcast and this.
I haven't, sadly. I need to. I'm writing it down.
You still have to, but it's that exact concept of that. In the book, it's essentially if you're following your dreams, the universe will conspire to help you along the way. And it's not just it all works out. I think the concept of the book is it starts easier. It's like beginner's luck. That's what beginner's luck. It's like giving you a little signal that this is a good path, right? You're pretty good at it off the bat, and then the more you follow it, the harder it gets. And it's testing you. How bad do you want this? Is this really what you're supposed to be doing? And it does work out, but only if you pass the tests along the way.
Yeah. And The Alchemist, what is that a coin? Or a couple of questions. What is that thing? Is it that just the universe? Is there like an understanding of like this is some form of entity, or it's just a connection of all things?
Oh, the Alchemist, like
like kind of the worldview that it sits on.
So I haven't read the book in. I need to reread it. I've probably read it 3 or 4 times.
Maybe we should start a book club.
Yeah. Oh man, that would be good. I've read it 3 or 4 times probably, but not in. God, it must be 5 or 6 years. Like I discovered it in high school for the first time. No, but it's in a world where like alchemy, with the precious metals and transmuting them and whatnot exists. But it's not.
Yeah, turning into gold or something.
I forget if it's just like a guy he meets at the beginning of the book, who is. It's not a huge. As far as I remember, it's not a huge like theme. Alchemy is not a huge theme of the book. Well, I might be making myself look silly. I'm gonna have to read it again. We'll have a book club.
It's all good. It's all good.
I just remember the thing that I took away is it's just this kid, this shepherd who gives up his flock and travels across the world and like meets his wife and finds this treasure that he dreamt about. It's his personal legend. And there were obviously horrible things he ran into and challenges that he ran into along the way, but it's just it's a classic story of the hero's journey, which I love.
The hero's journey is so interesting. I went to a kind of this TED Talk style event a number of years ago, and this woman who, I forget what her particular job was in Hollywood, she was some form of a writer, and she basically laid out all of the key principles and foundational elements that are present in the hero's journey that every human we latch onto and we want to relate with and have that be our story. And really, we all do go through that. But The Alchemist, it's obviously a work of fiction, or is it aimed at trying to be? Oh, yeah, okay.
No, it's, some like I don't know exactly when it would have been set. I don't think it's set, somewhere in the sort of 14 to 1600 range, maybe even older than that. It's made up story about a shepherd. Have you seen Dune 2? As an aside, talking about heroes journey.
Oh yes, I have seen it,
dude. That's got to be my
Yeah.
favorite movie of like recent times.
I saw it 3 times in IMAX, and I've seen it probably twice since then.
Dude, I
Yeah.
watched it on I had two flights on the flight back from France to I stopped in Connecticut for a couple of days. And my mom had a big birthday party. I
Mhm.
watched it on the plane there, and then I watched it again on the plane back to Seattle. I was just like,
Are you serious?
I can't get enough of this movie.
So what is it
It's
what is it about that film that just, like, really grabs at you? And then I'm just curious if there's overlap
okay. So
between the 2.
first and more, I would say more minorly, but it adds to the whole thing is the hero's journey.
Mhm.
It's Paul just going through the paces, being the chosen one, right? That's it's similar in Star Wars and the Matrix. It just the story of the
Any good
chosen
movie,
one,
really.
yeah, going, becoming what they're supposed to be. I just
Mhm.
love that. But it's the audio visual experience of watching it too
Mm.
that's so astounding. I love the Hans Zimmer's like the soundtrack and um, the the filming or the the CGI whatever they've done is so um,
So next level.
enveloping. Yeah, it's just the way. Just the like, I could watch it without a story if that were possible. Just like
Mhm.
different scenes, and I'd just be like, "Whoa, it's so
Yeah.
cool." But it just reminded me, Hero's Journey, such a good. If you haven't seen Dune 2 and you're listening to this,
Yeah. Gotta
that's
check it
your
out.
next
It's really
movie.
interesting to me too because there's so many different elements and layers to that film, that I think are you can paint across the different areas of life from leadership to business, obviously to religion, because that's a huge central theme around this false messiah complex. And one thing that was interesting after doing more research on that film, was Frank Herbert, the author. He wrote it, from, if I'm not mistaken, during a time when you had, I believe it was the wars going on in Kuwait and the fights over the oil fields, and you have these ancient civilizations, or I guess not even civilizations, but cultures and religions that are circled around this area, and everybody's kind of going for this one thing that the world runs on, which is, in dunes,
The
spice, but
spice.
in the middle of the desert, it's oil. And you can become intoxicated with it, which is interesting. Like in the Dune series, it actually gives you, like, it's like a hallucinogen or some kind of a psychedelic. But then, in the real world, if you think about oil, it can seduce you in a way of, give you a lust for power, and you can see a future with it in terms of, what you could create a country to be, because a lot of our countries are built on
Yeah.
these fossil fuels of coal and
He
oil and stuff like that,
he
which
who
is,
controls spice controls the empire.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's totally like there's so many levels of it where it's super creative, but it really, like you said, it's the hero's journey, and it's the same story that we've been telling over and over and over. And it's interesting to me, coming from a worldview of, like a religious context, and seeing the false messiah stuff, because in Christianity there is a belief that there would be a false messiah and a real messiah, and who can tell the difference, basically, is what it's going to come down to. And the only way you can do that is by having a relationship with God. And it's just interesting, like all of these different things that they've weaved into these stories. But yeah, the audio visuals of that story, I saw it in IMAX, and like the intended aspect ratio with the right sound, and it was just like, I can't even explain it. Like the first time I saw Dune in the IMAX theaters, and the ornithopters are coming in over Arrakis, and you have those drums going,
Yeah.
I just like melted. I was like, can we just replay that 20
I
times?
know,
But it's
dude.
interesting how we experience things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to find a way to see it because I didn't see it in IMAX. That was,
Oh yeah,
yeah. I think it surpassed Interstellar as like my
yeah,
yeah favorite
yeah,
sci-fi currently. I don't know if it's my favorite movie of all time. It's a hard. I'm not like a big
yeah,
movie guy, so it's
yeah.
just it's. I'm honestly a little curious how attached I've gotten to that movie.
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're curious, and just like, unpack that a little bit. I don't think I fully understood it.
I just don't. I don't watch that many movies. I'm not like drawn to watching movies.
Yeah,
Really very ever. It's like I
yeah,
find it time consuming to watch movies a lot of the time. Sometimes I'll start one and watch it in pieces.
yeah,
My partner and I, if we want to watch a movie, like we won't even watch it start to finish. And like
yeah.
this is the first time in a long time I have just been like jaw dropped. And I think a lot of it, yes, it's the audio visual experience, and a lot it's also just that the story, you know, of like
Yeah.
someone coming from seemingly nothing to
Yeah.
becoming a literal legend, like people uttering his
Yeah.
name, you know, before
Yeah.
before they know who he is, before they've seen
Who he
him.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's what you've been saying. It's the hero's journey. You know, the like I watch it and I'm kind of like I see elements of what I want my life and my
Mm,
career to be. You know, and it's
yeah.
um, just being a not so much being somebody that uh, someone else talks about, right? Because that's not even in the movie. That's not what Paul is looking for. He's just like good at a lot of stuff, and he's going on his way, and he's falling in love, and you know happens to be a really good fighter,
Yeah.
and he's doing it at what he thinks is right at every moment. But in through the process of that becomes a legend, and you
Yeah.
just watch it, and you're like, shit, you know, I want to be the triathlon Muad'Dib,
Mm.
you know.
The Triad Muad'Dib.
I know.
Lisa Lagaib. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's really intuitive and shows a lot about self awareness because I think really you hit it nail on the head when it comes to a lot of these great stories that are told. We like the hero's journey because we want to be a hero.
Yeah.
I think there's, especially in every young man, I can't speak for women because I'm not a woman as much, but I don't think that there's that same desire to jump and to be some kind of a leader. And we're all trying to figure out who we are, why are we the way that we are. You know, are you familiar with Ben Rector?
No.
You know, he's a music artist, um, kind of pop country. I don't know, but anyway, I really like his music because he writes most of his stuff, and he's writing from a place and time where he finds himself currently and the things he's going through. And he recently wrote a song in the past few years where he basically said, I forget the exact word, but I think the lyric goes, um, I'm working life out and I'm figuring out how not to blame mom and dad. And he's kind of talking about this segment of life where he's having a lot of self-discovery. And I think as kids, we go through this stage of life where it's like when you're really young, parents are everything. They are right and wrong. They even though we don't want to listen to them, we really truly do look at them as like they know everything. Then you graduate out of that and it's like, okay, my parents are complete idiots. They know nothing. And then you graduate out of that and then it starts to come back and you're like, okay, well, clearly there's like a balance to be had here. And, you know, even though they made mistakes, I'm not the one to say that, you know, I can't take all of my issues and say and the mistakes that I've made and blame them for it for every single thing. Like there's things that I can attribute to nurture. But anyway, he has that line and I just think that's so true because the hero's journey, I think part of it is coming to the realization that who I am today and the choices I've made, there are some predisposed things I've been exposed to, but ultimately my destiny, my future is going to be something that I have chosen to like lead out and head toward that direction, if that makes sense. So I think you hit it
Oh
the nail on the
yeah.
head when you're
Well,
talking about.
that comes back to the stuff, you know, that I'm just like learning by being around Penny, right? Where I'm like, why
Mm,
every time I hit a low, you know, I just don't get something done that I wanted to, or I said I was going to, or, you know, a really bad race, or just a string of bad sessions. Like, why am I not the person that I want to be? You know, and you think about
mm,
what you need to change to get there. And for me, I don't want to say entirely, but a large chunk of it just comes down to time management. Like if I could just manage my time well, I think a lot of things would go better. I'd get a lot more content out. I would get my training done in a timely fashion. I'd recover better than I do. I'd probably be able to train more. Um, and yeah, it's ultimately up to me. But it is also interesting that you said that, you know, you're referencing that line about parents, because I mean I had what I would describe in every sense as like a great childhood and loving and supportive parents, you know, throughout the whole thing. And I
mm,
know people who that wasn't the case, and they're definitely left with, a, you know, it's the secure attachment, anxious attachment. You know, like what it's how your parents acted towards you as an infant and a very young
mm,
child almost dictates to a T it's very hard for it not to be the case. How you will act in relationships, not just romantic relationships, just general relationships with other people as an adult. But yeah, I mean, it's useless to blame your parents, whether or not, even if it is their fault. Like just only you can move forward and do the healing and do the work required to maintain better quality relationships with the people around you.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough stock put into in today's society and the way that we find ourselves, and the topics of popular culture and the issues of topics of popular culture. I think really circle around one central theme, and this is going to be controversial, but the lack of fatherhood. Because I'll give you a little context for this in my perspective, and if you disagree, please disagree. I'd love to hear your thought on it. But so I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. I have 2 younger sisters. My dad, like, he died when I was 16 by his own hand. So like that was for our family, obviously a super difficult thing. However, now 16 years later, actually, in like next week, it'll be 16 years that I've been alive without a father and 16 years alive with my dad, as I'm 32 now. But I can honestly say, and I wouldn't have said this in the past, but I can honestly say I think it's harder for my younger sisters to have grown up, especially, so my 2 younger sisters, they were at the time 4 and 12. So my 12-year-old sister, she had 12 years of experience of having a dad. Whether he was a good dad or a great dad or whatever, she still had that role model to kind of see and relate to how does my dad love my mom. But my youngest sister was 4, like she didn't really grasp that. Like she had some inklings of it, and I've watched them grow up, and they have opportunity in front of them. And really, if I was to being truly honest with myself, I think if we each had every single same opportunity and every like thing kind of happened sequentially in the same way, it would be a lot harder for them to navigate. And I don't say that because I think women are weak. I don't say that because I think that I'm stronger than them. I think that, I was older, so that's an aspect of it. But just when girls don't have an idea of what truly love is, and there's a lot of thought and communication around like love is everything, whenever that is absent and you can't see that, men who are devious and want to get what they want can manipulate that and show a falsehood of what that love actually is. And then it just screws up everything because we're selfish and we're trying to get what we want and we don't care about who's on the other side of the table. So I think that it is really hard for girls who don't have dads. So,
that was a twist I wasn't expecting from the beginning. But no, I mean, well, not just girls, guys as well. I don't know what I would do. My dad has given me so much perspective just from having lived a full life and being able to, he wasn't in the exact same situations as I was, but similar enough to center me and say, like when I was just feeling so anxious about all this money that I had spent just to, get to France and back, and like, should I have done that? Was it stupid? I don't want to tell my dad, about my current financial situation because he's going to be mad at me for making bad decisions. And I kind of like half brought it up, and he's like, oh, that's great. Like, this is the time of your life to do that. And I remember when, when I was quitting my software engineering job to pursue triathlon, and when, certain things weren't working out. And I, when I was training with Lionel and then left to go to Seattle where I currently am, just the advice that he had given me, it's not even advice, just words of affirmation almost, to just let me know, like, hey, everything's okay. You're not doing anything stupid. And I think you're closer than maybe you think you are to getting where you want to be. This could lead into, I definitely need to be careful. I think we both need to be careful what we say from here.
I don't want to be careful.
No. It can lead to I don't know, just conversations in the current day and age about manhood and womanhood and relationships and what raising children can get. Well, everybody has a different opinion, I guess.
Sure.
Mine's not quite fully formed, but I forget what started this off.
I can't even remember. I think we were talking about
relationships.
Yeah.
Parents,
but no, I think
parents.
it's fine to take about.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so I really do respect other people's opinions, and I think that there's a thousand ways to skin a cat. Um, I do believe in some like more absolute truths, and just because like I think that in physics there are absolute truths, and you can't lie
Not
about those
true.
things.
That's not true.
Is it not?
I actually
Okay.
figured we would get into that today because I had mentioned like all the free will stuff. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
actually, so
Let's do it.
I want you to tell me these absolute truths. But and I think people would probably disagree with me about physics having absolute truths or not.
Okay.
It's all. I mean, it does just come down to faith, right? I think people can say they're atheist and they believe in physics and the natural law, but I don't think any of that is as concrete as they would like it to be once you point out certain flaws in the system.
Okay. Tell me,
Well,
did you ask me a question?
no,
Like, you want to know what
yeah. You said I believe in
what the
certain
absolute
absolute truths,
truths are?
like in physics, there are absolute truths, and we'll get to that later about physics. But I want to know what you're about to say about absolute truths.
Absolute truths. Yeah, so I don't claim first of all to know all of the absolute truths. I think that there is a distinction to be made between there's a lot of conversation, especially in the past couple of decades in our culture in the US of like your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. Well, those are called opinions then because, truth in its very definition is a set standard, just like we all say that 12 inches is 12 inches and your 10 inches or 10 centimeters is not my 10 inches. Like it comes down to that kind of stuff. Like there is a truth. Now, here's what's interesting. Um, some of the absolute truths like that I actually believe. Okay. I believe that the family unit, a male and a female, as we understand them to be biologically and other stuff, and I'll make a little caveat. I think that there are amalgamations and things that happen in our own brains that mess these things up so that you can have broken relationships and let's just talk about the topic of because I grew up in a very evangelical Christian household. We were told that being gay was sinful and wrong, and I do believe that the act of that is being gay or like having gay sex, like I believe that to be a sin. However, I can understand that I like where that comes from because when I was really young, like I had a experience like being molested in what would be classified as like a gay way. And as I grew up, I had that memory and didn't tell anybody about it until I was like in my late teens. I went to therapy and was like, hey, what's this? And I thought that, okay, well, when it comes to like sexual relationships, because something feels good with the opposite sex and with the same sex, then am I gay? And like I really struggled with that. I was like, well, what does it mean to be gay? Well, okay, so the world says, or like popular culture says, based on your sexual preference, if you lean one way or the other, that is how you should identify yourself. Which then I have realized now being 32, like I don't think that's true at all. I think that if I create my identity based on my sexual preference, then I think that's the lowest form of like that I could identify as because those are like very just like those are the base desires.
Yeah,
That's
it's
kind
the
of like the
lizard
base of
brain.
what yeah, 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 exactly. So getting back to what I was saying, I got older and I realized like, okay, well, I can understand from at least probably a lot of people's perspective why they would come to the conclusion that they are gay. Because like to be honest with you, like I could be quote unquote gay. Now I'm married for 7 years. I love my wife. I'm attracted to my wife. But if I had all the money in the world, if I had no moral standard and there was nothing to leave me in check, like this whole topic with the Diddy thing, if you have nothing holding you back from chasing after whatever next drug or high or exciting thing or different thing you want, I think that that can definitely lead to a lifestyle that I would believe is like, I mean, what are you living for? You're living for that feeling. So I think that that's dangerous. So, in the absolute truth in that, all of that is that when left unchecked, we will all descend into a disgusting mess of chaos. Like I believe that to be an absolute truth. Um, and I'll just say one more thing on that topic because I think that it should be said, like in the context of my story, when it comes to um, the sexual stuff. Like again, when I was really young, getting into pornography for the first time, which I do believe to be like not conducive to a good relationship because of the reality. Like when I first got married, even dude, like I had sex for the first time with my wife, and then I realized like, oh wow, this feels really different than the pornography stuff. Like this is like there's two different flames we're talking about here. And I realized like over time, like the one is better when you're in a relationship because it's long lasting. There's no shame attached to after the act and this kind of stuff. And I realized that, when I started watching pornography, like the same things that I was watching wasn't fulfilling me anymore, and it wasn't giving me what I needed. So I like started to go for like the weirder stuff and then the gay stuff. And I realized like, okay, well, this is a problem because where does this end up? This ends up with me dead in a gutter somewhere, really, realistically. So yeah, that's like really open and honest and
Yeah,
super brutal,
I
but
know.
yeah,
I
that's kind of where I'm
appreciate
at.
how open and willing to say that you are. I love it. Um, so I think when you look at, I guess, the data, society was built on the nuclear family. So the very, very first thing you said, the nuclear family, man and a woman,
Yeah,
blah,
yeah,
blah,
yeah.
blah.
Hmm.
If you go back 10,000 years to the advent of agriculture, and yes, there were like multi generational families for a while. Like people would, whenever I say this to people, they're like, well, kids were raised by their grandparents and blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, I mean that's not even what I'm talking about. If you live with your grandparents or like extended family, that doesn't negate what I'm saying. It's like once humans moved away from a very tribal setting and were able to specialize with their jobs, um, that's that's when society expanded and
Hmm.
we had civilizations and built cities and industrialized and became what we currently are as a civilization, in both, I would say, Western and Eastern world. First world countries
Yeah,
were
yeah,
developed by the nuclear family. I am not qualified to speak on your sexuality, but I would say if you were gay, unless you were really hiding it and taking it to the grave, I don't think you would be married to a woman. I think people well,
yeah. That's how. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I think that's how you know. I think if you love your wife and you're attracted to your wife, maybe you're bi, and you've made the decision to marry a woman. But I think if you are
yeah,
gay,
yeah,
and I know a lot of people who are gay, uh, that would just feel wrong, at least from
yeah.
talking to them. Like I don't know anyone who is gay and would say, sorry, a man who is gay who says, I love my wife and I'm attracted to my wife. Like those
Yeah.
aren't words that would come out of a gay person's mouth. And I think that's how you know. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
No,
to a certain extent, yes, I agree with you. I agree with you about porn. I think it's destructive. I think it's as much a drug, and with potential for at least psychological addiction, as anything else can and does ruin people's lives. I don't know if I would go so far as to say that I believe. Well, again, now we're going into
belief.
our opinions, right? You're saying I is it's hard. Were you saying it is an absolute truth that if we um, descend away from the nuclear family unit, that the world will ultimately descend into chaos? Is that you see that as an absolute truth? Because I mean, I can't I can't see that as an absolute truth, but um,
I don't know if I'd use as strong as an absolute truth. Like
yeah.
I do choose to believe that when we separate that, that we end up chasing after, the lust versus the love. However, I will say, like I have some friends that are gay and they are good friends, and I don't hold anything against them. Like one of my best friends, I've had conversations with him, and like he has struggled in his own like trying to figure out, am I gay? Am I not? And there is something like I don't have the same mental, I think, chemical makeup or whatever is going on, and I don't have the words or the tools or the experience to truly identify to say for sure. Like if I was talking to a man who proclaimed to be gay, he lives a gay lifestyle, like that is who he is. I can't say that I understand. I do want to understand, and I sometimes probably over label or over extend my own it's all good. I
Yeah, yeah.
over extend my own experience on someone else in order to try to seek understanding. Because I think if I was talking to someone like think of Cody Beals, he's a professional triathlete, super nice guy. he obviously like identifies as a gay man, and I don't know the inner workings of his life, but I don't think that me and him had the same experience. I think some people do have the same experience as me, because it's sadly it's relatively common for sexual abuse to happen to kids at a young age, often within families. Like, so there's something to that. But as far as like somebody who's born just like they have that inner, like, I like boys and I want nothing to do with women, because I think I do have more of a propensity to be like lustful after women than I would ever for a man, and I know that to be true. And if someone feels that opposite, like, I can't sit here and judge them and tell them you're totally wrong, or you're choosing that, I guess, is more of what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, and then when we bring up like your being raised in an evangelical Christian household, like that has to add a complete layer of complexity, right? Because that
Yeah.
from a very young age, you were taught certain things that would absolutely influence the way you think. Like I was raised in a,
Yeah.
it was a conservative Jewish household, but I, and I think if you were raised, or if I had been raised in an Orthodox Jewish household, I probably would have been told very similar things to how you were raised. But I wasn't. I was sort of aware of what, like, a lot of my friends who were raised super, ultra Orthodox, or I guess modern Orthodox is the other term. Um,
Hmm.
I was aware of it, but I never felt like I had to abide by it. And like I said, if like my parents were always, like, my entire life, to a point where it pissed me off, supportive, right? I would do bad on a test, or I'd get bad grades, and they weren't like angry at me for doing badly. They were like,
Hmm.
"You're so smart. Why don't you apply yourself a little bit more?" And I'm like, "No, I'm stupid. That's why I did bad on the test." And they're like, "No, no, you're not. Like, we know you're not. Just
Yeah.
like, uh, and like now as an adult, I feel like, oh, okay, that's great. That's how I would going to parent my children, just being like
Yeah, for
nice and
sure.
supportive out the ass. So I never fear, like, maybe for you there's an element of fear of, oh, if this is what I am, this is bad. And this is something I
Mm.
have to stay away from. Whereas I never felt that way. I mean, I think I'm like very, very straight. But I never had that inner conflict, like, oh, well, if I am gay, that's not, I, I'm not, I guess, scared of it, right? Because of the
Yeah, yeah,
home I grew up in, and the ideology that I was raised by.
yeah.
But
Yeah, I think there is an element of fear that was in there. I've worked away from that in just my own understanding and doing more. I mean, when it comes down to it, like searching of the Bible and trying to understand like Old Testament versus New Testament type of stuff, because there are conflicting, if it's surface level, like really conflicting ideas
oh
or
yeah,
laws or whatever.
big time.
Um, and I think it comes down to partly like God working with a different culture and a different time. Like, if Jesus Christ, the Messiah, was to come as he was, you know, prior to his death, if you believe in that, to the world of today, like, I think he would be treated, or his message would be received quite differently. So I think it's interesting, like, thinking about that. But I have one thing I have really worked through is I was talking to my uncle by marriage this weekend about this whole concept of what we call righteousness by faith, rather than centering around the legalistic, almost like the, I think with the Hasidic Jews, or like the Pharisees of old, like counting your steps on the Sabbath, is those light switches off, how to rest on the Sabbath. And like that mindset, I think, carried over in a lot of our upbringing to like this legalism, the do's and don'ts.
Yeah,
And I've come to realize, like, I think it's more about this, um, because in a lot of Disney movies and a lot of the world, you hear this concept of like follow your heart, but there's also strong proverbs in the Bible that talk about the heart is deceitful above all things, and I think that there's two hearts we're talking about. There's, if you come from this worldview, there's the heart that is installed by you being a new creation under the banner of love of God, and then there's like the post sin heart, where you're obsessed with whatever it is that you want to go get, you go get it, almost like Satanism level of stuff. And that, being able for me to distinguish between which heart is installed in the moment, I think is really something that I've been doing a lot of thinking about lately.
so I'm a little lost on that, on the two. I think
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
I'm a
totally
little
fine.
lost
I'm
on
still
that.
figuring it out.
Yeah, two hearts. um Yeah, I mean, I definitely followed the second one.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Hold that well, I guess you could call it Satanist. I don't. Um,
Or Satanism? I think
uh,
Satanism is like Satanism is the pursuit of life based on pleasure, right?
oh, hedonism.
Or hedonism. Yeah, excuse
Hedonism.
me.
Hedonism. I actually, I was reading a book that had a very interesting. It was a character who was describing what hedonism is, and I kind of understand it in a different way now. Hedonism is, yes, when you pursue pleasure to such a point that you don't like it anymore, right? So, and I
Mm.
realized this when I was at this all you can eat sushi place that may have gotten me sick before my last race a little bit. Um, and I love all you can eat type places. Me and my partner, we go to this Korean barbecue place all the time where it's just $30, all you can eat. You just go grab the meat, put it on the grill on your table, and like you go and you're super hungry, and the first round is like incredible. It's just,
Amazing.
oh man, this
Yeah.
is so good. And you want to be like, you want to try a little bit of everything. You want to be like selective, like, oh, I don't want too much of this because I want to try that. I want to save room for that. And then you go for, at least this is how it goes for me. My second round, I'm getting a little bit full, and I'm like, this is so, I love this. All you can eat. Like, there's no end to it. And then you go back for the third round, and you get enough. You're so much food, and you're like, oh, I can't finish this. I'm so
Mm.
full. I don't want to eat it anymore, right? And it's the same thing that you and the first round was the best thing you've ever eaten. But
Mm.
I mean, so that's hedonism, is when you indulge in something to a point that it's something pleasurable to a point that it's no longer pleasurable. Then you're like, I don't want any of that anymore.
Yeah,
Which
it's
is,
interesting.
you could say it's um, not a good thing to do, right? It's like keeping things, having things in moderation such that they remain
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
pleasurable for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting concept. It's an interesting way to
Yeah.
put about it. I never thought about it in that way. But yeah, I
Well,
appreciate you being able. Yeah, go for it.
well, no, I was just saying I want to go back to that absolute truth thing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Like, and you want me to say another absolute truth?
No, oh, if you have another absolute truth,
I
but
don't.
I'm just,
Not at the
yeah,
moment. Not one that's
no, okay.
premeditated. But
So I, my view on this, I would say there is an absolute truth. I think I'm guessing that for you and uh, your upbringing, it has something to do with God and the creation of the universe and what the like. Um, well, okay. So to what degree? Because you said in physics there are absolute truths. So to what degree? What would you say is an absolute truth of physics?
yeah, I'm gonna talk out of my butt here because I am not a physicist. However, um, as I said
Neither am
that,
I.
yeah. Well, so as I said that, I was thinking like, I was going to go off a little bit of a tangent because there was an interesting podcast by Joe Rogan. I forget the guy's name, but he was doing all kinds of work tracking Google and these other companies that were, I forget what his name is. Anyway, he was like a really smart technologist, but he had this belief system basically talking about, everything is a transducer, meaning our eyes, they perceive the world as they see them. Our fingers, we only observe the world through these mediums, what he calls transducers or tactile things, smell, touch, whatever. And so we're not actually experiencing, quote unquote, the world itself or whatever it is that's there. It
Yeah,
could be
fundamental
a
reality.
simulation. Yeah, yeah. Like, what is the fundamental thing that you're experiencing? So, from that perspective, I'm like, when it comes to physics, I'm like, well, I don't know. Like a lot of things that I have, held true in my heart as absolute truths over the past even like 20, 30 years, I've kind of come to a place like, well, maybe I don't know everything I thought I knew. But for like an absolute truth would be if I'm holding this bottle in front of you, when I let go, it's not going to go up, it's going to go down.
Right.
Like very simple things. We could start with that because I don't know physics that
Well,
well.
that is an evolutionary advantage to that. Every single time that's happened, right? Every single time you drop a bottle, it's gone down. But exactly like what you were saying, we think of fundamental building blocks of reality as being, subatomic particles and atoms and
Hmm.
molecules and forces acting between molecules. We have We have the standard model of the atom, all the parts that are making it up and the forces acting between them, that
Hmm.
very, very accurately describes the world that we live in, and exactly what you just did, where you dropped the bottle. For pretty much every single thing, but we can model almost everything on the planet in the
Yeah.
scale that we live in, right? But it's worth noting that every single theory we've come up with is based on observations through our, what that guy would say is transducers, through
Yeah.
just perception,
Yeah.
which goes through a filter, our ego, and through whatever's going on in our consciousness.
Yeah. Even if you let that out, it still goes through your
Yeah.
brain and is, yeah.
So it's there's nothing to say except that's all we've ever seen, right? It's fundamental. That's the fundamental reality through the lens in which we're looking at. But things in physics get very interesting when you go smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. The model
Hmm.
that we have come up with for the atom and the way that things work with each other no longer works. And so once you get down to the level of quantum mechanics, uh, new theories have to be created to explain what happens when you look at that scale. And we've gotten to a
Yeah.
point
Like
where
the
we're
double slit
able,
experiment.
right?
Yeah.
That was like the very beginning of it.
Yeah.
And so we've had to come up with a completely new way of looking at things when we go down to that scale, because I mean, beyond where we can see, that's just classical physics is just not how things work anymore. Um,
Yeah.
and so an absolute truth of when I drop the bottle, it goes down only works in
On this
our
earth
in our yeah in
or
our
in
current
this realm.
what I love this guy. His name's Donald Hoffman. He would call it on the interface. And so this whole our entire mode of perception is, and I'm sure, I mean, you and I would probably disagree. Uh, well, this
I
gets
hope
really
so. No, I'm just
convoluted.
kidding.
It gets really convoluted, right? Because if we look at evolution by natural selection, which if you are a man of God, it's less likely that you believe that that's where we came from, but it almost doesn't matter for the sake of this argument. But if we look at
Yeah, that's fine.
evolution by natural selection, right, we're 4 billion years ago started from the primordial stew and what the oceans of the earth was, and basic building blocks that were able to reproduce. Uh, and then we get on land, we have the basic components of perception. You could either see reality as it really is, or you could see reality with shortcuts created by your nervous system to enhance fitness, right? Whether that's getting food or evading a predator or finding shelter from a storm. And when they do the math, this guy Donald Hoffman and his team, they've done all these simulations, evolutionary game simulations, and come up with these sort of evolutionary game theory equations. When you
Hmm.
plug in seeing reality as it is in terms of its accuracy, or obscuring reality in favor of not visual, just sensory hacks, right? It could be smell, hearing, or touch, or taste. Any any shortcut or hack to aid in fitness. Seeing reality as it is without these shortcuts goes extinct. If you go long enough, like that sense of seeing the fundamental building blocks of reality goes extinct. And so we can think, well, we've been evolving for billions and billions of years. We have, and we know, right? We can look at an optical illusion, when it's like slowed down or stopped, and we say this is what's actually happening. But when you see it in motion, we see something completely different. It's impossible to see it as quote unquote it really is, because we have these built-in shortcuts within our sensory system and our consciousness and the way we process information that keeps us on
Hmm.
what he says. He calls it the interface, right? It's like a desktop
Yeah.
interface. And right, like there's an icon on your screen, right, containing files that you've worked very hard on. And if you click on that, or if you go there on the, let's say it's in the bottom right corner of the screen, the files in that folder are not actually contained even close to the bottom right corner of your screen. They're somewhere on your hard drive or in your RAM, right?
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you had to deal with all of the diodes and transistors and every the inner workings of your computer and its architecture, you would never get any work done. So that obscuring actually allows you to be way more efficient and productive than you otherwise would. But that doesn't mean that you go drag your thing into the trash and delete your files, right? You shouldn't. It's still very important to understand how things operate on the interface, because that's how you get work done. So saying, when I drop this bottle, it goes down, from your perspective,
It does that.
right. And saying, well, this is fundamental reality. It's
absolute
as
truth.
flawed as saying the file in the bottom right corner of my screen is actually contained in the bottom right corner of my screen, right? And so his suggestion is, well, one, it seems when we look really close, reality isn't made up of atoms and molecules. It's a really handy way of modeling things, and it's gotten us tremendously far in our world as we currently live. But if we're trying to figure out what's really there, there's too many flaws in it, right? Like when I was talking about quantum physics, when you go down to a certain scale, things don't work anymore. Space-time acts differently depending on the way you're looking at it. And so it does put absolute truth in an interesting
an interesting paradigm.
Yeah, an interesting paradigm. And so what I really like his sort of suggestion, which is essentially the same as Buddhism, and several other Eastern philosophies. He says, well, all we know for a fact that exists is consciousness. Like, we know for a fact. We can look at different things that we perceive on the interface through our consciousness, and some of them act weirdly at different scales, some of them seem to line up, but all we have ever seen is things that happen through consciousness. And so the only thing that we know exists is consciousness. So what if we started looking at the fundamental building block of reality as consciousness, and then develop a real scientific testable theory from there? And he's got a whole bunch of papers and talks out that are basically going through that, and it's inconclusive. There's no like, oh, I figured it out, the fundamental, the absolute truth. But it comes back to a thousands-year-old tradition of we are all just pieces of consciousness in this vast web. And
it's interesting you use web as to suggest the connection. Yeah.
Well, I had mentioned free will. Like, I don't believe in free will in our last meeting.
Tell me why you don't believe in free will.
Well, there's multiple reasons. Part of it is my dad. We're talking about our parents being raised by our parents. My dad, from a very young age, is like, free will is BS. Free will doesn't exist, and there's too many ways to look at it where it doesn't make any sense. So I've been doing a lot of mindfulness over the last several months, and there are these guided ones, and this guy is like introducing new. They're not techniques, but new ideas throughout. It's like a 10-minute practice that you just do every day. And one of them, so have you heard the concept of no self or not self? Like in Buddhism, they say there's the self is an illusion. Have you heard of that? Have you been introduced to it?
I have heard of it. I have done no research on it.
Well, on the surface, it seems to make very little sense, right? But the Buddhist perspective is your self is an amalgamation of different processes, mental and physical processes, giving you the illusion of having a self. And these mindfulness, it's not specifically Buddhist, but these mindfulness practices, this one specifically that struck me, I guess they're all trending towards just be aware. Don't get too caught up in what you're seeing, hearing, smelling, or feeling or thinking, right? Your thoughts are as much a sense as the rest of your senses, and it's something that you don't have tons of control over. So when you're doing a mindfulness practice, you can feel yourself sitting in space. You can feel yourself directing your attention to different things. You're, mainly sort of what you're looking at, what part of your body you're noticing, and it's not so much directing your attention because you're not in control of it. You're merely noticing things as they enter your field of consciousness. And when he says, well, let's, listen to, or not listen, feel the feeling of your own head. How is it that you know you have a head? Why is it that you feel your consciousness is centered in your head when really it's not? You can feel it everywhere, and it seems like your thoughts are coming through your head behind your eyes. And it's really just because
I think it has to do with where your eyes are.
Exactly. Yeah. So much is happening, in this general area, but you can perceive yourself. You can perceive the feeling of having your own head. You can direct your attention, or your attention can be directed to your own thoughts. And so when you look for who is meditating, you are able to, it's paradoxical, right? You can see the meditator. If you think that you are the meditator, you can direct your attention on yourself, right? And then you have this feedback loop of, well, who is meditating, right? And so when you look for the self, you can't find it because you can, right? Because you can direct your attention on yourself, but you, quote, air quotes, are the one meditating. Are you really? It's a complete paradox. And one of the things throughout this practice is like you're not choosing where you direct your attention or what comes into your stream of consciousness. You're just noticing it as it happens, and it's so complex through just living life that it appears like you have control, but you don't have control over what's going on in your head, right? When you sit there and just observe your thoughts for long enough, you realize that you have no control. You only notice what's happening, right? And that's step one over the decisions you make is what is your current context? What are the things that you're currently looking at? What are the things you're currently thinking, feeling, smelling, touching? Those are that's the basis off of which you make decisions. And if you sit there and try to be mindful for long enough, you recognize that none of those things are truly in your control. So that's a super low level way of saying, okay, you're living in a reactive state. So, and then and disclaimer, I don't live my life thinking I don't have free will, right? It's not, I don't think
was
it's
going to ask,
possible.
Ari, you don't have thoughts, you don't have control. So what do you have?
Well, I do have thoughts. I just notice them
or
as
you
they
don't have
happen.
thoughts that you can control.
But I think going through life and feeling like you are making predetermined decisions would be basically impossible, right? Again, you have the feeling of self for a reason. You have the feeling that you have free will for a reason. It's very evolutionarily savvy thing to have for a human. I think it's one of the reasons we have been able to evolve to where we are. Or what if it's not evolution you believe in, if it's from a religious context, at least feeling that way has made human civilization get to the current point. But I, again, believe in evolution is a tough thing because I almost, evolution is a thing that we have only seen on the interface of perception. But if you look at evolution by natural selection, we started at a certain point. The most complex thing on the planet would have been a little worm with a basic electrical transport system, the very, very first nervous system that ever existed, which was sensitive to light and ultimately other electrical impulses. Right. So that's the first inklings of consciousness that existed on this earth. Just passing an electrical signal from one place to another, and the input maybe caused it to move elsewhere, move towards the light, move away from the light. And as it gets more and more complex, the nervous system spreads out. Things have a central nervous system, the beginnings of a brain. At some point, there would have had to be, and none of these things have free will, right? It's just impulse in, action out. Uh, and at some point along this sliding scale of evolution, there would have had to be a piece of the nervous system that was specifically designed to give that animal free will. Like, otherwise, like, where does it come from? Where does free will come from? And it's just where did that develop, and what animals have free will and don't. And I feel like it's just an impossible question to answer. Where did it evolve? Who has it and who doesn't? And as far as we know, the only reason we believe we have it is because it feels like we do.
Yeah, man, so many things to unpack, and so many directions I could take it. But I guess the most relevant one that I would kind of respond with is, I think it would take less faith to believe that during the next snowstorm, a perfectly formed snowman would come into, just from the snowflakes arranging however they felt, and then creating like a snowman. I think that would take less faith than like you were saying, like when it comes to that evolutionary system. Because I do come from an evangelical Christian worldview, but I believe that when you look at the entire animal kingdom and everything that we would consider life that may have some level of consciousness in it, we as in humans are created or have evolved in ways that no other creature has. And I think that what separates that, really, when it comes down to it, is like the free will. Because what you were saying is, like, it makes sense. Like, I can see, like, if you go inward when it comes to the observation of thoughts. I don't believe that, I don't have any control over my thoughts, to a degree. I think that there are certain things that are within our control and outside of our control. If I tell you, like, you've heard this before, if I say blue elephant, like, don't think of a blue elephant, you're going to think of a blue elephant. From that perspective, you don't have control. But I think when free will comes into play is like, if I see something through my, we'll say, transducers or my eyes, my fingers, whatever, I have a choice at that point of what my interaction will be with that. Will I think about that elephant more, or will I dismiss that thought and kind of move on to something else? And I think that in our society right now, like, it's really hard for people because we're constantly inundated with information, and people we've lost that ability, I think, to like critically think of like, what things should I shun and should I not? Because like the dopamine system has been hacked. So like there's a lot of interesting stuff there. But
when
if
you
don't
make a decision, when you you say you perceive something and you have a choice, something as simple as where should I go to dinner? I mean, that might be too simple. It should be something a little bit, because that's literally random. Something like
this man killed my son. Should I kill him?
Well, that's a good one. Right. So you say you have the choice of whether or not to kill him, right? But wouldn't you say so? I'm guessing you won't kill him.
I really don't know. I don't because this is an interesting topic of conversation. Because if you talk about, so my uncle through my wife's family, he was the only guy in Rwanda during the genocide who was a foreigner. And for that genocide, you have two people groups, the Hutu and the Tutsi, who were neighbors living with each other, shaking hands, going to each other's birthday parties, giving in marriage. And then one day, through these circumstances, people that were friends, a light switched, and then they were murdering each other, people who they had been in relationships with. So I think I have it within me to do any unspeakable horror. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, it depends on, to make it super simple, which of the voices am I listening to on my shoulder? Like, that's like kind of the age-old good angel, bad angel thing. I don't think that's what it is necessarily.
Are you choosing which one to listen to, or is it whichever one is more convincing, right? And is it the way you were
but there's still a choice. Like, if I hold you a red apple and an orange, and I say, Ari, which one do you want? like you have to make a choice.
I have agency. I am
Yeah.
picking one or the other, but the reason I make the choice is in some way based off of the previous 27 years that I've lived.
Sure. Yeah. Look, so
You
we are
know?
like computers in that way. Like
And
large language models are just tons of data. They're a reflection of everything that we have ever said or done. Just like our children, to a degree, are a reflection of everything that we've ever said or done. But then there's, I think,
and
an age.
where does the free will come into, right? Because if you have a baby that has nothing going on except it's got the building blocks to be taught,
Mhm.
to learn, and all it does is absorb information from the world around it. Two babies on two different sides of the planet are absorbing completely different information. They're going to make
Yeah.
different choices at different points in their life, right? And that's not just based off of which one they like more or which one is the right decision. It's who were their parents, who were their friends, where did they grow up, what was the
Yeah.
culture when they grew up. It's I don't understand. And again, I don't live this way, right? It's, you have to feel
Yeah. Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
have choice, but where does the
Where is
true,
it? What is it?
and I guess what's the, who cares if we do or don't? The real corollary and why it matters is, are you responsible for your, or how responsible for your actions are you?
Hmm.
And how
I would.
you would what?
Yeah, I was gonna say like I take responsibility for my actions, but I think that's something that has in these ideas of thought and these lines of thought or philosophy that you're talking about is there's a loss of the understanding of like an age of reason, because there's a reason that we say you can't drive till you're 16. There's a reason we say you shouldn't drink until you're 21, because if we're going to make it really relevant, if I ask a 4-year-old, do you want to be a boy or a girl? And because she grew up with two brothers and they like playing in the dirt, and she says, well, I want to be a boy. And then, let that child make that decision. Nobody's going to say that that's right, because they haven't reached enough frontal lobe development to make a decision where they understand the ramifications of the future if they make these decisions.
Sure, but again,
Because there
that's
has to
not
be a level.
right. That's not free. Well, right. Same girl who has two older sisters says, "I want to be a girl." Is that free will, or is it her environment?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good
It's hard.
argument.
But the point that I guess I'm trying to make is, it's especially relevant in the legal system, right? So somebody brought up in a terrible crime-ridden community, extremely in an extremely likely scenario to become a criminal themselves, right? And that's what they had to do to survive. Um, should they be held morally responsible for their actions, right? Because everyone in that community, but in theory, has a choice. But what you're saying, has a choice of whether or not they commit these actions or find a way to get away. But
Yeah,
so many people make what we say is the wrong choice.
the wrong choice.
Right? And is it because they had free will and they chose to do something with risk and thought they could get away with it and they got caught? Or was it out of their control? They were destined to do that from the moment they were born. And instead of holding them morally responsible and putting them in prison for X amount of time, releasing them and starting the cycle over again, we set up our legal system in some other way that, and let's go back to the parents. Someone grows up in a broken home, and has extremely anxious or avoidant tendencies, and cheats on someone or does something extremely hurtful in the context of a romantic relationship, and say the wronged partner says, okay, I can't believe you did this, we're done, or says, look, you did this, I am holding you responsible for your actions, but you have to go to therapy and fix this, right? Your parent, this isn't you didn't freely choose to do this, you didn't freely choose to hurt me, but you have to take responsibility for your actions from here going forward, and fix it, right? If you do it twice, it's a choice in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's where the only way that the world operates in an idea or in the belief of free will is if you are willing to extend grace, because in forgiveness, because without that, like you said, that if free will doesn't exist, then okay, well, what's the meaning? I mean, meaning of life is like, okay, well, then I will graduate to a position of atheism, and I believe like, well, we were all just a primordial soup, and we all just developed out of nothing, and it's interesting because I think there's aspects of that stuff that it could even be true, because from my worldview, when God spoke the world into existence, it was not a quiet event. It could have looked like something like the Big Bang. And there everything that we have figured out how to describe in words and in papers and come up with these theories for, all we're doing is making observations and figuring out how to communicate those observations to each other. They are true when we find them. Like, we get things mixed up and wrong, but it's like this old age problem. It's like, well, Ari, do you see this color? Yeah, you're like, yeah, Seth, that's purple. I'm like, okay, well, how do I know that's not what you see as yellow and I see as green, but we're both saying it's purple? It's like, there has to be a level of understanding, and without that understanding and saying things like, or believing things, I think believing things like that, there's no free will. If we were to truly operate that way, there's no reason to exist. There's no reason to hold back from any doing something that we all carry within our consciousness, something that says like, maybe I shouldn't do that, or maybe I should do that. If we all say that doesn't exist, and we have no control over our thoughts, no control over our free will, and we operated that way, then World War III would have already happened, and it would just be sitting on a burnt planet.
Well, two things. Again, it's because we evolved this way in whatever fashion. I think it would be impossible to go through your life feeling like you don't have free will, right? It's an integral part of our operating system. But two, I disagree. I think that if you treated everyone else as if they don't have free will, but like you were saying, are very generous with your grace and your forgiveness, at least the first time through a first transgression, I truly think the world would be a better place. If you say that people are, like, I don't believe that you, the general you, listeners, any individual should live their life as a victim of their circumstance. But I think that treating others in many ways as a victim of their circumstance is the best context in which to go forward. Like what we were saying, people who grow up in a really bad community who end up becoming, going through the criminal justice system, saying, well, what choice did they have? Maybe instead of sending people to prison, we can come up with a better rehabilitation system. So they don't end up in here again, and so that they don't have kids who repeat the cycle. Or, when a partner who had grew up in a broken home and, not loving and supportive parents makes a mistake in a relationship, instead of saying you freely chose to do this, saying, well, maybe it's not going to work out between us. I can't get past this, but please, do your healing so it doesn't happen to somebody else. Right. Because it's like they didn't freely choose to do that. Most people don't want to hurt somebody else. They are just
hurt people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting thought experiments. Obviously I come at it from a very, like I said, a very Christian worldview, and that's how I've made sense of the world, and just my experiences, and that's how I've learned to best, I guess, understand and describe what's been going on around me. But yeah, like some people, no one chooses the home that they're brought up in. From that sense, like no one chooses it. And then, and up until that age of reasoning, which I don't know where it is. I think it happens for every person at a different time. Like that's when life really starts, when you can choose, when you can choose to be a member of society that you want to further and grow and enrich, or if you want to take and mutilate.
Yeah. Well, so my my friend Ado, he's a U.S. short course triathlete. We were living and training together for 6 months a while back. He is very religious. And
who is this again? I'm sorry.
His name's Ado Doherty. You should look him up. Okay. He's such an interesting guy to have on the podcast. He's like one of my favorite people on this planet.
ADO?
ADOH.
I'll look him up.
And we would just talk felt like, well, what would have been hours, because, we'd go on a 4-hour bike ride and just,
Yeah.
not necessarily argue. Sometimes it would be arguments. Sometimes it would just be discussions. And I felt like we came from extremely different places. Mine was much more, I don't know, you might call it spiritual, mystical, but somewhat physical, and his is extremely religious, spiritual in a
Mm-hmm.
different way. Much very by the book, I guess.
Yeah.
And we came from different places, but arrived at the same destination in many ways, right? And my whole uh, belief against free will, or against the existence of free will, gives me comfort in many ways. And you would call it, and Ado calls it, God's plan. It's not. It's things happen for reasons beyond our control or our ability to reason. Um, and I do believe the same thing, but for an extremely different reason. I believe that we live in this vast web of conscious agents interacting with each other, that in itself makes a massive form of super consciousness. When people have mystical experiences of oneness with the universe on psychedelic drugs, or extreme experiences, whatever it may be, that they experience this oneness with the world that is so complex, because there are trillions of pieces
It's like a
interacting
brain. It's
at
like you're
every
inside the
moment. Yeah,
brain.
so just that it's I don't have control of this. I am just along for the ride, so I don't call it God's plan. It's whatever the universe has in store. But we're talking about the same thing, and it's something that for
Yeah.
him, and I don't know where you stand on this, for him, gave him great comfort and stability in
Mm-hmm.
his current path. That I don't have to. Right now he's traveling the world to go try to make the Olympics, and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but it's not up to him. And so he doesn't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about myself. It'll all work out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, just in response really quick, I do believe that like there is like God has a will, and if it aligns with us, if we choose to align ourselves with that will, then we will go down that path. Like that, there is one way that He would have it to be. However, because of the concept of free will, like similarly to how a quantum computer works, you're asking it what is the highest peak and valley in this entire system of data, and and it picks one out. um, there's a lot of potentials to arrive at a relatively like the same place, but I don't believe in like predestination, because like I think that it totally goes against what free will is 100%.
No,
Like
I
that's
don't
I think
either.
it's
I don't either.
yeah.
But the complexity of the system in which we're living makes it, and the randomness involved.
Yeah.
It's not predestined, but it is out of your control,
Yeah.
is what I would
Yeah, something
believe.
I've been thinking about a lot recently, is like the whole quantum mechanics world. Um, this is a theory, and I don't hold this to be like the truth. But I have observed things that make me think that the quantum world is actually it's the veil torn where we can see the principalities, excuse me, where we can see the principalities, the powers, the ghosts, the angels, the demons. Where does God? What is this entity? What are these other entities that He's created that are the messengers of Him? Like, I think that because our brain produces things like DMT, and when you have near death experiences and you have sleep, you experience little pieces of this. And then another interesting fact I heard today, by the way, on this podcast with Lex Friedman, by this guy who does archaeology, anthropology, a lot of these or all of the psychoactive drugs were never found in the Middle East. They were all like have origin tied to Central and South America, which I thought was super fascinating. Take that how you will. I don't know how that arrives to things, but I do truly believe that like these experiences with mushrooms, psilocybin, LSD, whatever, like it's opening up a part of our brain that I think is intended has been intended to be shut off for a time, because going back to the whole God's plan, God comes back, evil is done away with. That whole framework would make sense at that point. Like, because right now, I think if we all truly had the ability to see what's going on in the quantum world, I think it would drive everyone insane. People like who get schizophrenia or whatever, and you have, because I've seen things like I've had non-drug induced moments and like mental craziness where I'm just like, I can't handle this. And if everyone had the ability to see that side of the world, that I think is like what we call the spiritual world, or now the quantum world, that it would change how a lot of people think. And I think that even from a biblical perspective, when you have a lot of these visions, like where Paul or Saul is going, to persecute, and then God comes to him in the cloud and is like, boom, hey, here I am. What are you doing? Or a lot of these other visions where, that Moses had, or whoever. Like, I think that is similarly to what people are experiencing now. But I think what's interesting is when it comes to the interaction of that side of the world, the principalities, powers, the quantum spirit world, whatever you want to call it, we as humans, to your point, we are very reactive and easily deceived. So I don't know exactly which side of the table I'm talking to if I decide to go take a trip over into that world. So I'm like, okay, well, this sounds interesting. And, with my worldview, or a lot of these religious worldviews that do believe in an eventual good, we know that the bad side, and we know that our evil sides inside are trying to deceive others to get our eventual whatever outcome we desire. And we are very easily deceived. So, yeah, that's my thought on that.
Dude, should we talk about triathlon?
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason we can't. We don't perceive the quantum realm. It's because it's so small. We didn't evolve to perceive it, and so our entire system of perception is, what we see. I can't imagine what the world would be like if everybody was on mushrooms. It would look very different. It would look very different.
It would.
Do you think it would be better or
like
worse? Do you think it's from the devil?
70s. Say again?
Is it from the devil? Is it godly?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I lean toward the place that it is, with any mind altering substance, if there's something that I lose my ability, let's just use drinking, for example, drinking and driving. If it's something where I lose my ability to steer my consciousness in a direction that is beneficial to others, no matter how good it seems in the moment, like, I am leery of that, because I don't want to hit someone because of drink driving and kill them. Now, that's an extreme example.
Yeah.
I lean toward the place, though, that like there's this really interesting biblical story where, again, Saul goes to meet with this witch, the witch of Endor, and she says, hey, I want to talk to Samuel, who was a prophet. And he knows, like, what we know from all of his stories is that he believes in God, and he knows that these witches basically call up evil spirits to impersonate and act like someone else. So he goes to the witch of Endor. He asks, hey, let me talk to Samuel. He talks to Samuel like he's Samuel, knowing full well what he's actually talking to, because he was seeking a level of comfort. So, like, it's those kind of stories. I don't know what she was brewing, because, you hear about a witch's brew. Like, what are they brewing? It was probably some kind of psychoactive drug to open up your mind to that world, to talk to whoever you want to talk to. So, like, yeah, I'm pretty leery of that stuff. It's very intriguing. I have been like, I want to try that, but I know that probably shouldn't.
Well, going back to the very earlier parts about the ego and perception, one of the things that, and this is all this interesting research coming out about psilocybin mushrooms and LSD from a healthcare and therapy standpoint, what it does is essentially bypasses your ego, right? When I was talking about all of these evolutionary hacks that we had to enhance fitness, and that's why we have, we can see all these optical illusions, that it's just our eyes literally playing tricks on us. Certain things, like when you see a set of blinds, over window blinds, right? And you see one of them is white and they're all on a line, so they're all white. But what it really is, and what you can see, I don't know this specific thing from experience, but is that, oh no, all of these blinds are actually vastly different colors because of the way that the light is hitting them from different points in the room and outside. But you don't see that. It's your ego, your brain says, this is not worth noticing. It doesn't
Yeah.
enhance our worldview, getting to where we need to be in our fitness.
Yeah.
So it allows you to, and could be a bad thing it is a bad thing in many cases. You definitely shouldn't engage in it in anything
Yeah.
but a very chill setting where you have nothing to do all day and somebody supervising you. I mean, I not a big God or the devil guy. I don't believe in that. But
Hmm.
if I were, I would think it's on the positive side.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to argue with people who have like had a lot of like
Life-changing
good
experiences. Yeah.
life-changing stuff, like coming out of PTSD and things like that. I do believe that you can reach those states, those psychoactive states, without using the drugs, actually.
Yes.
Through meditation, through breathing. There's a lot of different things. I mean,
Mindfulness.
back in the olden days, I think like they'd starve themselves. People have starved themselves, and you can get to a hallucinogenic state. There's a lot to going on there. But in the sake of time, I do want to ask you just two more questions, and then I probably should go swim. But you do music, like you like music, you play, you compose, and do things. Have you ever heard of synesthesia? Synesthesia, I think is how you say it. Have you ever seen colors while playing music?
Not sober.
Okay, so you have seen it. Yeah, it's interesting because I was going to ask that, just kind of on the topic of this, perception and things like that. Because like when I play piano, usually at times when I'm feeling just very emotional, and I've gone to play a specific thing, like I've seen colors in between the keys, kind of how you were explaining the whole situation with the blinds.
That's how people. That's how most people who have perfect pitch. Well, actually, I don't know about most, but a lot of people who have perfect pitch associate notes with colors. So if C is red, someone can play a C without them knowing it, and they'll see red, and know that that's a C, right? That's it, and at least one of the ways that perfect pitch like presents itself.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't have perfect pitch, but I was just curious if you shared that.
Me neither.
Okay. One last question for you. When you die, what in your mind is the best thing that happens? Like concerning like afterlife, no afterlife, or whatever.
I haven't thought about this one extensively, but based off of my developing belief system with the consciousness as the fundamental building block of reality. Within that context, your body dies, but your awareness, your piece of consciousness still exists in some way. It's tough for me to say I believe something happens. What would I want to happen, which I guess is the question. I haven't thought about that much either. I mean, a cycle of death and rebirth, becoming a flower, becoming a snail.
A snail would suck, dude.
Why would it suck?
Okay, Ari, I'm gonna just oh, by the way, tomorrow you're gonna be a snail for the rest of your waking existence. You good with that?
Well, if you said tomorrow you will die and then be reborn as a snail, it's a little different. I don't want to wake up as a snail, but if I'm born as a snail,
cool with that?
Well, I'm born as a snail, and I'm not doing it. I think I would have like as much satisfaction with my life as I do as a human. Right? I don't know. Do they even sleep? I'm just slugging along, finding food, trying to grow, trying to find a new shell. And that's that. I'm just driven, I guess, way more driven by my impulses. I wouldn't be happy or sad or thoughtful. I would just live.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't laugh because I'm like making fun of you. I'm giggling a little bit because I'm that's like the furthest thing from my mind that I could imagine is a good life afterwards. But I mean, you do make a good point. Like if I was to be reborn
stuck in a snail's body, yes, terrible.
Yeah.
But a snail in a snail's body,
snail, yeah.
I feel like
It's
snails
an
are,
interesting thought.
yeah.
Yeah, that's an
Yeah.
interesting
And
thought.
then one day, one of these, you die as a snail, somebody eats you as escargot, and then you become a kitty cat and you live your
Yeah.
beautiful life. One of those lives as a it's just a fuzzy, furry, affectionate cat
Sleeping and
live,
purring. Yeah.
yeah, hopefully in somebody's house.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be
Well,
good.
Ari, thank you so much. I know we didn't talk about triathlon much at all,
Who
but I
cares?
actually really appreciate that. You do
Yeah.
triathlon. I do triathlon. We both know we love it. And people who are going to listen to you know that you obviously love triathlon. So thanks for diving into some of these really interesting topics and holding space for me to share some crazy thoughts. And I really appreciate hearing all of your beliefs and the things that you're thinking about and going through. And yeah, it's really enjoyable.
Yeah, man, I love this. I can't say I've ever done a podcast like this where it's just so it's about everything but triathlon, our belief
Yeah.
systems, the things that drive us to continue moving forward, and it's awesome. So yeah, if you made it to this point, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for having me
Yeah, for
on
sure.
again. And
Yeah,
wait,
you're
you're
welcome.
you're
We'll
moving
do it again.
tomorrow,
No, sorry, not tomorrow, Friday.
Friday. Oh, okay,
Tomorrow we're getting a lot of the stuff and packing. We're actually packing partly tonight, but Friday we
cool.
are going to be leaving from here, Jellicoe, Tennessee, driving to my mom's, Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Woo.
stay there for a couple days, then we'll go to Colorado Springs for a few days, and then over to Salt Lake for a day, and then arrive in Redding, California
Right on.
with an Airbnb for 10 days and hope we find a home.
Oh man. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I'll see you soon. It's not.
Yeah.
It's a bit. If you make it up to Vancouver,
Will do.
with Evan and Josh, then yeah, I'll come down. We'll get some training in. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, dude. Awesome.
Sweet.
Sweet. Thank you so much to Ari for coming on the pod and for diving into such deep topics with me. I think we kind of butted heads on a few things. We flew over each other on a few things and flew underneath each other. And there was just a lot of really colorful conversation where we were able to share what we believe, why we believe, and how we operate as human beings on this world. I think at the end of the day, the only thing that truly matters is that we are looking out for each other more than we are for ourselves. And yeah, so just thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much to Ari for coming on and being willing to open up about such deep things. If you made it to this point in the podcast, though, I just want to say thanks so much. If you are listening or watching anywhere, if you don't mind liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, it really does help to continue to grow the podcast. And I really appreciate it. If you want to sign up for a newsletter that we'll be sending out more and more frequently, you can sign up for that at the stupidquestions.show website. There's a link at the top of the page. Thank you guys so much. And we will talk to you in the next one.